Christy with the Chirp YouTube channel. I would like to talk with you today about human dignity and how that relates to our work or our parenting with children who have developmental delays, disabilities, diagnoses, special needs, whatever you prefer to call them. We know when a kid isn't developing along typical trajectory, and we all have terminology for that. Those are the kids that we are talking about today because it's quite common that they don't get treated the same way with regard to their individual personhood as do children who don't have those unique needs. I'm going to talk through 11 ways that we can work on developing our skills in this area. 11 areas where we should be aware that we may be not treating these kids or adults too with the kind of dignity that we should be, especially if we claim to be followers of Jesus, because he chose to treat every human being as if they were incredibly precious, valuable individuals, because each of us is a precious, valuable individual to him, and we should be to each other as well. I'm pretty sure nobody would claim to disagree on this topic. But as time goes by, especially if you're a professional in this field, as time goes by, we become tired and we get a little overwhelmed with how much support some of our students need from us. And sometimes that support becomes a little less about the individual and a little more about how I need to keep my classroom running, how I need to get such and such a thing accomplished, how I need to get finished at Target and go home so I can cook dinner. Sometimes those are very valid things from our perspective. We do need to get home and cook dinner. I do need to keep my classroom on an appropriate schedule. At the same time, I need to be very careful that I don't start rushing, that I don't start living with no margin or running my classroom with no margin so that I can't attend to the unique needs of the individuals in my program or in my home if I have kids in my home. Number one, assume that the child understands everything you say. Even if you doubt that that's the case, we need to speak about and to this child as if she understands everything. This is really hard, especially if we are going to talk to a parent about the behavior development skills, strategies necessary for their child. We will often talk about a child right in front of her, maybe to her parent, maybe to another teacher or another parent. It's really difficult to figure out how do we communicate about the child's needs without saying anything that's disrespectful to the child. I'm still working on this because there are some things I need to communicate that don't sound respectful. And I am working on ways to phrase things differently that sound loving, compassionate, and respectful. I find this especially helpful to think about when there has been a difficult behavior day with one of my students. I don't want to say right in front of the child, wow, he was really bad today, or he was really naughty today, or he just couldn't pull himself together. Instead, I might say something like, it was a bit of a tough day, but we turned it around, we got back on the right track. Because we are a team, I and my students. And if I'm out of sorts, they're going to be out of sorts. If they're out of sorts, I still have to maintain my equilibrium because I'm trying to bring them back to equilibrium. So, better to phrase things as if we are a team and we accomplished a task together. Not that there is a great, brilliant thing that I can share with you here about how to speak about students with respect and give them dignity as you do that. But please keep in mind that talking about kids right in front of them is just as disrespectful as talking smack about another human, an adult human, right in front of them. It's just weird and really not okay. We don't know how much some of our kids can understand, and even if they can't understand, it's a terrible habit to get into for me to be talking about another person in a disrespectful way or a non-compassionate way at all, to say nothing about if they're right there. It just leads to a kind of callousness of spirit that I don't think any of us want. Number 2, assume the best, especially behaviorally. Assume that the child can't control himself rather than he's choosing not to. Because this is almost always the case. When a child does not behave as we expect, does not communicate as we expect, we have to assume that it's because something is in the way. Maybe it's a sensory need. Maybe it is a communication deficit. Maybe it is a sense of overwhelm because the environment is too busy. Assume that there's a reason behind why you're getting something you don't want or you're not getting something you do want. And look for ways to resolve those problems. It also leads me to have a more compassionate heart, because if I look at my little student, realize he's having a lot of sensory problems today, he's hot, which leads to a lot of problems for our kids behaviorally. It was just noisy in the corridor he was coming down, and maybe something happened that morning that kind of set him off on the wrong foot. There's a lot going on for all these kids that lead to the behaviors that we see. And when I remember that his behaviors are communication, I feel a lot more compassionate. Rather than thinking, wow, he's kind of a brat, I can think, I feel so sorry that it is so difficult for him. I wonder how I can make that a little bit easier. Number 3, convince rather than force. And there will be some times when we shouldn't try to convince at all because the child has made it expressly clear he does not want something. One of the theological concepts that I've come across in my reading over the past few months has been that Jesus used power under. He did not use power over. Think about all of the circumstances where he had the opportunity to force his way, to make people do things the way he wanted them to. He was very powerful. He is very powerful. He is God. He has the ability to make his way in the world exactly what he wants it to be, with force. And yet, we never see Jesus doing that. We see him as loving compassionately, being gentle, saying hard things with love and compassion, not forcing people to behave the way that he wanted them to. This concept is very applicable to us in the field of special ed or parenting if we have kids who have different needs. It is really easy to force kids to do what we want. And there are times when we have to. For example, we can't let kids just escape out the front door and run in the street. It's not safe. I had to stop my dear student on Sunday physically from throwing chairs in my classroom. I have a really small classroom, so the chairs would have certainly bounced off someone, maybe me. There are times where we will have to force our way because we are protecting someone, maybe the child himself, maybe another person, maybe ourselves. Sometimes in order to help a student past a blockage, learning-wise or behaviorally, past some sort of a fear or a refusal to do something that we know is going to benefit them in the end, sometimes we do need to urge a little bit. Sometimes we do need to say, we're going to try it. What I'm talking about, though, is just pushing kids through life without allowing them to come to any conclusions themselves, without allowing them to express individuality, without allowing them to have the right to say no sometimes. or the right to say, okay, but I'm going to do it this way instead of that way. Okay, I'll wear pants, but I want to wear pink pants instead of blue pants. We need to carefully evaluate if we are using power over to control and manipulate, or if we are using power under to support and encourage. Number 4, treat all behavior and communication as meaningful. Even a grunt, even kids looking away from you and covering their ears, these are ways of communicating. These are ways that children try to express themselves. I need to take that as meaningful rather than just thinking, oh, he's just being sensory. I should think, if he's covering his ears and looking away, I am being too overwhelming. I need to turn it down. I need to turn my voice down. I need to maybe not make so much animation in my face. We respond to what we see from the kids. I need to make sure that I'm treating all their behavior as communication and that I'm responding in an appropriate way. Number 5, this one is kind of implicit in all of the other ones I'm talking about, but think especially about compassion. I have to tell you, in any caregiving field, there is a problem called compassion fatigue. We see so many needs. We see so many families that are wounded, grief-stricken, hurting, not responding well, being mean to people trying to help them. We see a lot of hurt. And sometimes we're kind of done with it. We kind of would like to be all finished. We would like to be in a field where we only see good things. I know there's no such field. But in caregiving fields, in parenting too, it happens regularly that we lose our ability, hopefully for a short time, and hopefully this never happens to us, but when we are overworked, overtired, we sometimes lose our focus and we lose the ability to be compassionate, to see things from someone else's perspective, especially a child who is maybe aggressive or mean or hurting himself and others, or just really difficult to understand. It's especially with those kids where we tend to revert back to manipulation and control rather than coming from a place of compassion where we try to understand and we try to support and encourage with the power under structure. I don't have a cure except rest. Make sure to nourish yourself well. Take some time alone to process all of the difficulty that's happening in your life. Talk to God. Talk to valued people in your life who will understand you and not judge you for your emotions. Emotions cannot be right or wrong. Emotions are a barometer that tells us what the pressure is in our life. We can listen to our emotions and we can use them to inform what our decisions are and how we choose to think and speak about things. But emotions themselves cannot be wrong. Don't be afraid to express your emotions. Journal your emotions and make decisions about how you're going to feed the compassionate part of you. Maybe actually journaling about what it might be like for that child you don't understand very well. Maybe thinking and praying for a family that has been really mean to you or has been demanding of you that you give them a cure or something that is impossible for you to give them if you're a caregiver. If you are a parent, please get support. Maybe a small group that focuses on supporting people who have kids with special needs, but it doesn't have to be a specialized group. In fact, if a bunch of families who are grieving because they have diagnoses for their children that they never wanted to receive all get together, sometimes it's difficult for one grieving person to support another grieving person, especially if it's in the same arena. Sometimes it can be helpful because you can share resources, but too often everybody needs support at the same time in the same way, and there's nobody available to give it in groups like that. So maybe think of a different kind of group, maybe a Bible study or even a book club or something like that, a group of people who can support you, who can give you help, who can give you a listening ear if that's what you need. And all of us need a listening ear regularly. I get my compassion refueled by praying for the people who are really difficult for me to understand. I get compassion from thinking about how difficult life is for a child in my classroom. I think about all the different needs that he has and his limited ability to express them. I think about all of the sensory issues that plague our students sometimes and how frustrating it must be that no one understands them. And I want to be that person who does. I bet you do too. Number 6, offer as many choices as possible to your students or your child. Most people who have developmental delays or diagnoses of any sort have fewer choices in life than non-affected people. I even have fewer choices in life than if I hadn't received a diagnosis of Crohn's disease and celiac disease. I had to change my diet. I didn't have that choice anymore to go to a regular restaurant and eat regular food. That choice was taken off the plate. However, there are still lots of other choices that I can choose to make. And that makes me feel empowered, and it makes me feel as if I have agency in my own life. Our students need to feel like that too. We need to make sure that we give them lots of opportunity to make choices so that they too feel like an individual with power and purpose, and they have the opportunity to make choices. Obviously, some of our kids are not verbal, so we will need to use communication books to help them make choices. We can even use just 2 pictures if that's where our student is, and I have a video about that linked up there as well. You can see a nonverbal student of mine who is just sort of learning to request using just 1 symbol, and now he is using 2. This last weekend, he successfully made his choice from a field of 3 pictures, which is a great step up. He's really making good progress. This child is having a lot fewer behavior difficulties because he's able to express what he's thinking, what he wants, and we listen to him. It's a great idea. Think of every opportunity you can in your child's world where you can give her a choice. Number 7, value uniqueness rather than constantly pushing for your child to fit in. I know we all want our children to fit in. The truth is that no child ever fits in. Think back to your junior high years. Did you fit in? I don't know anyone who thinks that they fit in high school or even as an adult. We all constantly feel like we don't quite fit anywhere we look. Hopefully we fit in our families or in our close friend groups, and hopefully we're creating an environment that makes other people feel like they fit with us, because that's our job as grown-ups. That's our job if we choose to follow Jesus. He made people feel included. We need to be inclusive like that too. I would be less concerned about my student fitting in and more concerned about valuing the unique things that make my child so special and precious. That's what I want to focus on in my classroom. That's what I do focus on. Each of my students is very different, has very different strengths and areas where they need work. As do we all. We are all equally precious and flawed. I think of a family I worked with where the son had a diagnosis, and when he was very excited, he would flap his hands. And because this was so very different from how other kids expressed excitement, his mother worked really, really hard to eliminate that behavior. I don't have a problem with eliminating behavior that isn't as socially acceptable, and in fact, I've talked about this in previous videos, like that one. I have a problem with any treatment that suppresses a child's individuality or that suppresses a child's exuberance. I want kids to be excited about life, and if it means that they flap their hands sometimes and other kids of their age group don't do that, then maybe that's okay. It's fine to teach kids to push their hands together and to say, "I'm excited." But please don't crush your children. Please don't smash every bit of individuality out of them because you want them to look like a kid who doesn't have a diagnosis. Please keep teaching. Please keep modeling behaviors that are maximally socially acceptable. And remember, all of us do things that are not socially acceptable sometimes. All of us have uniquenesses that make us look weird to other people. And maybe that's not so bad. Number 8, focus as much as possible on positive feedback. I learn so much more when people compliment me on something I'm doing right than I do when someone criticizes me or tells me, you need to work on that. I don't respond that well to negative criticism. And I don't think most people do. I'm not so sure that constructive criticism actually works at all. I think it's kind of a bad idea. We can always say, it might work better if you X, or that sounds really frustrating. How could we do it different next time? But I'm not so sure it's my job to point out to you all the things that you're doing wrong. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's not my job. I'm going to leave that to God. Our kids respond much better to positive feedback. If I see Johnny throwing a toy when he gets mad, of course I'm going to step in and say, oops, remember, we keep toys on the floor so that they stay safe. If I'm done with it, I can say, all finished. Too often in our classrooms, in my classroom, or in our homes, we get into the routine of saying, nope, we don't throw. Nope, we don't swear. Nope, we don't spit. And we forget all of the good things that are happening. I like those words you're speaking. You're being such a good friend. Thank you for your listening ears. I love it that you remembered what our story is about. Thank you for cleaning up so well. We have a lot that we can compliment in our students. We have a lot of positive ways that we can reinforce behaviors we want to see again. One trick is that in a classroom, there's probably always one child that is doing what you would like everyone else to be doing at any particular time. Hopefully it's not always the same child, but kids want to do what's going to get them positive feedback. So if you compliment Anne because she is cleaning up when the bell went off, then a lot of other kids are going to hear that and say, I want that compliment too. I'm going to clean up when the bell goes off too. And they really benefit from the positive feedback you gave to Anne. And if you give it to them as well, it builds, positive feedback builds us up. It makes us feel better. We don't feel like we're quite so faulty because someone sees how hard I'm working. And we can offer positive feedback even when behavior is terrible. This last weekend, my little guy who was going to throw a chair was really out of control, and I had to restrain him so that he was safe. I treated it like an opportunity for a cuddle. Usually in a restraint situation, it's scary because I'm afraid that the child's going to hurt me. I'm afraid that someone will walk by and see me physically holding a child and think terrible thoughts about me as a professional, which I don't want. So there's all sorts of these background feelings. But instead, I just wrapped my arms around him and rocked back and forth, and he calmed down pretty fast, and I was able to give him a little kiss on his cheek. And this is a church situation, so we can actually touch the kids. Please don't do this if you're in a public school. You know the rules. I don't in your particular school. But I murmured in his ear, it's been a little bit of a hard morning, but that's okay. We're going to get through it. We can calm down, and everything will be just fine. And this kid really did droop. He had a couple more moments during the day where we had to remind him of what we were doing at that particular time, or where we had to encourage him a little bit more. But that was a really beneficial thing for him. He knew that his behavior was not under control, and he didn't like it, but I was able to encourage him even in that moment a little bit. That was totally a God thing, to speak those words of truth to him in that moment. Also keep in mind, if a child's totally in a red alert, like if they are melting down at the moment, talking is not going to help, and restraint isn't going to help either unless they're going to hurt someone. Basically, just get out of the way. This little guy was just angry, and he wanted to express it in an unfortunate way. And so preventing that and then giving him a cuddle really dissolved the problem. It really diminished the need for any further intervention. It really worked out well for him. Of course, every child, every situation is different. I just mean to use this as an example of how positive feedback, positive words, encouraging comments can unwind a child or even an adult. Number 9, discuss better options. This may be consequences. If I throw a chair, I'm going to hurt someone I care about. If I ask for a hug, I will get a better outcome. We can talk about those kind of consequences, and we can discuss after things happen what might have been a better option. I didn't really like that consequence of not getting a snack because I was so worked up that I couldn't sit at the table with everyone else. So next time, maybe I will start calming down sooner by reading this really repetitive book that I like. And then I will be calm enough that I can sit at snack and I won't miss it next time. We can talk through these options and help kids problem solve. Sometimes they just don't see how they can control their own behaviors, and we can help them learn that by helping them think through what their options are. Number 10, this kind of goes along with the one I talked about where we need to appreciate all behavior as forms of communication. This one is treat all needs as valid and important, even or especially if you don't understand them and you don't feel those needs yourself. The easiest way to express this is with sensory needs. If you don't have any particular sensory needs yourself, it's really hard to understand why a child might come over to you, put your hands on his head, and ask you to squeeze his head. That seems a little weird. And to a typical person who doesn't have any experience in this area, it is a little weird to see a teacher squeezing a kid's head. It's a little weird. However, if that is scratching a child's sensory itch and that's what's going to help him function better, then it's really disrespectful of us not to help. You can think about this in the area of communication. A lot of our kids use echolalia to communicate. And yes, there are better ways to communicate, but if that is one of them that our child is using, we need to respect it rather than just trying to stamp it out. Number 11, maybe I should have put this first, but it is personal privacy. I am not going to tell you my husband's secrets. I don't have kids, but if I did, I wouldn't tell you their secrets. However, kids with diagnoses or developmental delays, especially those who are nonverbal or minimally verbal, get their secrets told a lot. Some of this is necessary. We have to talk to their doctor about certain bodily functions, but some of it is unnecessary, and we really need to be careful about sharing that sort of information in a way that we wouldn't do with other kids or other people in our lives. The issue of dignity for people with special needs has been a lot on my heart. I'm grateful that you took the time to watch this video. I would love to hear your comments about places in your life or your career or your classroom where you are learning better how to treat people who are different from you with dignity and respect and compassion. It's a lifelong project. I look forward to continuing to learn in this area and getting the opportunity to practice in my classroom, and of course everywhere else I go, because every person deserves to be treated with respect. It's super hard, especially when I'm irritated or tired or just frustrated with life, but it's worth the practice. I think it's what makes us rise above the animals. We have the opportunity to correct our behavior, to be better, and we want to. I hope that your day is fantastic and that you go forth into the world spreading compassion. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.